And we are live. And yes, Instagram does not work. Okay, next time. Welcome everybody to the planets in the 2024 series. Today, oh my God, it works. Do you see
Oh,
the echo?
Instagram Live is working? Yeah, I hear an echo right now.
That's not good.
It sounds like it's on your end, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I'm taking it out. I can't do this. No, I'm listening to myself. Sorry, everybody. I can't do this. Okay. Hello, everybody. I tried to do Instagram Live at the same time, but I hear the echo, so I'm not going to do this.
Well, remember
Welcome to my
Mercury is still
channel.
in
Huh? Yes.
Mercury's still in Sagittarius. It's applying to a square with Neptune right now. It's not out
Not a
of
good
its
time.
shadow period. So we're still gonna have Mercury like technology shenanigans for a little while longer, you know?
Yeah. We're not gonna. Yeah, that you're right. So test it after in February, probably better. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming to my channel. My name is Jasmina Brozovic, and I'm an astrologer, a modern astrologer. And today, in the series of planetary transits of 2024, today we're going to talk about Mars. And I have the best person to talk about Mars. It's Caleb from Heavy Metal Astrology. Hello, Caleb. How are you today?
I'm really well, Jasmina. I'm really stoked to be here.
Awesome. Caleb and I already talked about Mars, why we need Mars in our charts. You can check it out on. I have a video on YouTube somewhere in my stream. You can look for it. Before we start, there's Azur who's here. Thank you, Azur. Hello, nice to have you. Okay, Caleb, before we start with the Mars and everything, because I know Mars is very important, tell us more about yourself. Introduce yourself so people know where can they find you, and what are you doing in life with astrology?
Yeah, certainly. All right. So my name's Caleb. My practice is called Heavy Metal Astrology. My particular interest, insofar as astrology goes, is the malefic planets, Mars and Saturn. With right now, I'm just primarily focusing on Mars and seeking to understand Mars as best as possible and help other folks understand Mars as best as they can in their own chart and kind of come into a remediatory relationship with Mars. Like in my practice, I'm really seeking to ride the razor's edge between recognizing Mars as, somewhat inherently dangerous and a ruler of subjectively negative experiences oftentimes, but also a critical, integral part of the chart, part of life in general, right? So that's the main focus I've been on for the past
Awesome.
4 or 5 months. But I also do like general chart readings as well.
Absolutely.
My like background, I would say, is like mostly Hellenistic. I was trained by Adam Ellenboss, who merges Hellenistic with like modern techniques and planets and things like that. So I find that sort of synthesis is kind of where I live and dwell as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And by the way, guys, go check Caleb's website. Beautiful writings over there. I'm just enjoying reading all of his writings. Very profound. Okay. Well, let's jump in. Mars. It's a driving force, right? It's what keeps us moving and going. So tell us, what are the significant traits of a planet Mars, and how can we feel the energy? Like before we start with the transit, what is Mars? What are the energies?
Sure. I think what leaps out immediately to mind is like if we just consider Mars visually, is Mars is this bright red planet, and there's immediately a connection to heat, right? Which we often perceive as being red, as being bright, and with blood, this warm substance that flows through our veins. There's something like vital and invigorating, vitalizing, right, about Mars that appears in very acute, bright, and sharp ways, right? It leaps out at you. Mars is sort of an exclamation point, right? It is an expletive that you scream out, right, when you burn your hand on the stove. But it's also sort of that feeling of vigor and ambition that comes when you're like very physically invested in a task, like, I don't know, lifting weights or moving boxes
Mm-hmm.
or even sort of life and death scenarios, like if you've ever been in a situation where you're tending to someone's wounds, like first responders, right? They are children of Mars as well. So sort of like these adrenalized moments that summon our
Mm.
need to fight, to flight, to that summon us to action and often to act on instinct. That's sort of where Mars resides.
Is this now that I think about it? Do you feel? Oh, by the way, Azur has had a reading with you with the Mars specialized reading, and he highly recommends it. So there you go, guys. You heard it here first. Go ahead a reading with Caleb on Mars specialized reading. I'm thinking about Mars. What do you think about inner motivation? Could that be that's something one of the significance of Mars? How we
Yeah.
motivate ourselves
Yeah,
to do
certainly.
things? Mhm.
I think there's something sort of like solitary and divisive about Mars. Like in William Lilly's Christian Astrology, he talks about like what friends different planets have, and the line for Mars is so sad. It's like Mars has no friends except Venus or something like that. But
But
the
she's a
I think
lover.
she
She's a
is a
more,
lover, and
yeah,
Mars is her lover, right? And they will get to conjoin this year. We'll talk about that later. But
yeah, yeah.
I think the when one is separate, when one is isolated,
Mhm.
there's a
Mhm.
desire to rejoin, to attain union. And in that act of desiring, in that chase, there's an object at the end of the line that one yearns for, that one charges toward, right? If we think of Mars as a soldier, well, every soldier usually has an objective, right? A goal in mind. So Mars is,
Mhm.
yes, that like burning fire of motivation that leads one sort of on a course to, I don't know, achieve what would be the word, like achieve union with the target of one's desires, that goal far off in the distance that you're running toward or fighting forward.
Yeah,
Does
it
that make
makes
sense?
sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
it makes sense. And now I'm thinking, why does he have no friends? I mean, if you think about his ruling Aries, which Aries wants to be by himself, he's not a team player in that sense,
true.
like he's a soul. And then Scorpio also has like the tendency to have within deeply intimate relationship with with yourself. Digging deep in your psychology of one own self. So that's interesting. Now that I think of it, why does he have friends? Yeah, because Mars needs that. Um, yeah, he needs
Yeah,
to
I
be
think
alone. Yeah.
rupture is a really good Mars keyword, in that like a lot of martial events involve like rupture, whether it's in like
Mm,
harmonious Venusian relationships that involve rupture of the physical lunar body, right? Or rupture
mm,
of the social collective, right?
mhm.
Rupture of the sort of Jupiterian whole.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily have to be negative, in that when you work out, you tear your muscles, you create literal fractures, ruptures, tears, right, in your muscle fibers. And then to grow stronger, you must eat food, which then rebuilds those muscles, right?
And I'm
But
thinking,
you have to undergo sort of that tearing to get to that place of increased strength, right?
absolutely. And I think that you get blisters and ruptures on your skin as well when
Hmm.
you do physical work, and a bunch of cuts. Your skin is also kind of see. So Mars is stronger than Saturn.
Maybe right now. Right
Yeah,
now,
yeah, well,
yes. Yeah.
yes. Okay, so let's start. So this is general Mars. It's our energy. It's our drive. This is what keeps us
Yeah,
moving. And
conflicts, competition, desirous yearnings. Not necessarily like the way Venus desires. Mars, I think, desires in a different way, but desire nonetheless.
yeah, yeah. I think from my teacher Steve Jobs, he says that Venus is what we want, and Mars is how we're gonna get it. So this desire is Venus, and then how are we going to get our desires in which way? It's the in Martian way, which makes sense, right? So hunger like desire, says Azur. Yeah, that's right. What about your Mars is, Azur, now? Anyway. um okay, so I know currently Mars is in Capricorn, and that's a he's an exaltation in Capricorn. He likes to be in Capricorn. So do you want to start with the beginning of the year?
Yeah, where we are
Yes.
now.
Okay, let's
Certainly.
go. Because he's
Um,
making some great aspects with Saturn and Uranus, right?
yes, and
Yeah.
I think this is actually a really fortuitous time to have this conversation in that, yes, Mars has recently entered Capricorn, its degree of, or its sign of exaltation. And we also have a Scorpio moon right now. So the Mars is ruling the moon, and it's my lunar return. So that has like a nice flair to it, right? But
Awesome.
moreover, we sort of have this really bold and I don't know exactly what the word would be, but like annunciatory event coming up in 6 days when Mars is going to make its heliacal rise on January 9th. So if I can just back up a little bit, on September 30th
Mhm.
last year, Mars fell into the beams of the sun and started becoming invisible. If you all remember, we had that Mars Cazimi in Scorpio in the middle of November, the 17th. And that Kazemi moment happens right when Mars and the Sun are conjunct. That those like conjunctions, Kazimis, right? They only happen though when a planet is in close proximity to the Sun, and in order to reach that Kazemi, that sort of sizzling rebirth moment, the planet must approach the Sun. But approaching the Sun means becoming invisible, right? Becoming sort of like combust, burnt out, desiccated, and dried and outshone right by the sun. So we haven't even seen we haven't had a visible Mars, like one that we can go out and see in the sky since September 30th. So throughout all
Mm.
of October, November, December, we've had an invisible Mars, and whereas Mars is um, visible in the sky when it's about 10, 11 degrees away from the sun, those are like moments either right before sunrise or right after sunset when you can see Mars, but that viewing window is very, very brief. But on January 9th, Mars will hit 15 degrees of separation from the sun and become much more visible. And that distance of 15 degrees is sort of the general guideline for when a planet is under the beam. So we'll finally have Mars out of the beams of the sun, visible. And when a planet makes that moment in Hellenistic astrology, it's called
Mhm.
phasis. It's this moment of appearing,
Mhm.
of like stepping onto a stage and announcing the work that one has come to do. So if we think back to Mars's Kazemi moment in Scorpio on the 17th of November,
Mhm.
if we think of that as sort of like a new moon moment for Mars, like the new moon happens in darkness, and so does the sowing of a seed.
Mhm.
When you sow a seed, when you put it in the ground,
Mhm.
you don't know whether or not it's actually sprouted and taken root until those fresh little shoots and those first two
Mhm.
leaves appear above the soil. So it's the same way you don't really know the new moon has happened until you see the waxing
Yes.
crescent like 2 days later. This is sort of Mars's waxing crescent moment when now it appears after this
Mhm.
intense, long 3-ish month long period of like invisibility and purgation. Now Mars sort of like has this real glow up because it was in detriment when it became invisible and now steps onto the stage in its sign of exaltation. And we
So,
sort of get to find out, well, what started in darkness during that Scorpio Kazemi is now
mhm.
ready to be debuted. Does that make sense? And
I
become
like that.
visible and
Yeah. So
seen.
whatever we kind of planted, now we're gonna see the first things of
It's
that.
yeah, it's starting to
So
take root, right? Whatever
yeah.
you initiated around that time, whatever started for you then.
So would you say that when the planet is invisible in general, is it in a fall kind of? It doesn't have that strength,
It
or
loses potency insofar
mm-hmm,
as like the
mm-hmm,
way I think of it is if the king is this
mm-hmm,
sort of like regal sovereign and this
mm-hmm,
incredibly bright astronomical body, it is outshining, right? Like the
mm-hmm.
sun takes up so much space that there's just no room for that planet to have its own voice heard. Does that make sense?
Okay. So
Yeah,
it's not that strong, but let's say, it's not
sure.
potent enough. So not that strong. So now it's actually getting its strength back. So it's getting stronger, stronger, and more potent. And it's in Capricorn, which is extra layer. So
Right.
that's why
Yeah, it's a
this is very good month to do things. And okay, go on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and in general, this is, I think, the strongest Mars will have all year. This is the best
Yes.
condition Mars will be in. Uh, for pretty much all of 2024. We will have Mars in Aries later on in May, but that entire time Mars will be co-present with the North Node, and we can talk more
Mhm.
about that when we get there. But there will be an inherent instability to that time period
Mhm.
that will, whereas I think it will be good for Mars, it probably won't be good on a collective level.
I
Yeah,
makes sense. Yeah, I'm excited. Like I booked my whole January full. I'm using Mars. It's going through my fourth and fifth house, depending on this house system, and I'm just doing it. I'm doing it, and then I'm gonna rest later.
you're getting very creative, but in a very productive way, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
that's how I embrace, because this is going to be a lot of Capricorn energy. We have this new moon coming up, and then we have Mercury and Venus joining, and Sun will leave, but it's going to be a lot of, it's a whole Capricornian month in the sense, right? So
completely.
anyway, digression. Go ahead, tell us more. Tell us more about January Mars then.
All right, so in January, I think the biggest thing to note is that Mars is going to sextile Saturn,
Mhm.
which is, right, its domicile lord, and then also make a trine to Jupiter. I think more than anything else Mars is doing in
Mhm.
January, I'm really excited for the Mars Jupiter trine. In that, like, Mars Jupiter together lends this sense of like victory. Like, I
Mhm.
think Jupiter can ameliorate and redeem Mars's most extreme and destructive tendencies and give Mars like a righteous cause, as well as the rewards and recognition
Mm.
for its sort of brash and bold efforts. Right? It
I like
gives
that.
a constructive,
Mm.
wholesome, nourishing pipeline for Mars's otherwise destructive energies to be expressed, right?
That's very good. I like that. Yeah. So it's giving it. Yeah. So I think that is happening on the 12th, just after the new moon,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if you think of like
Mhm.
Mars in Capricorn as sort of this like combustion engine, and if
Mm.
you Jupiter in Taurus is sort of like the fruitful earth, the wisdom of the body, right? The value of sensuous experience, then I think like Mars in Capricorn is like a tractor that can or like a heavy farm equipment, right, that can sort of be put to work in Jupiter's vineyard, right? And then
I love
hopefully
it.
bring in like a rich harvest, right?
I love that. Oh, especially in in the earth signs, right? So it's even more fruititious. Is that a word? Fruititious.
Fruitful or fortuitous.
Fruitful, fortuitous. Yeah, fruitful. That's good. I like that. That's really good. Yeah, it's a very productive energy. It's not like, in your brain, like if it's an air or just doing something without getting it done. If it's in fire, this is earth. This is like for a
Sure,
long
you
term. I
can you
like
can
that.
reach out and you can touch it, right? Yeah.
Very tangible, very tangible. Awesome. Okay, that's the best, I think, aspect Mars makes this month, right?
Yeah, the Mars
Hmm.
Mercury conjunction as well on the 27th. I also
Hmm.
like, aside from the fact that it's
Hmm.
square the nodes. However, this is the third of three Mars Mercury conjunctions we've had recently. The
Yeah.
last one was in Scorpio, but it was also opposite Uranus, and I think the same day as the lunar eclipse in Taurus. And personally, that like manifested as like, I think, the classic Mercury Mars delineation, which is like arguments and
Yeah, yeah,
sort of
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, like poisonous, viperous words, right? The second one we had was in Sagittarius, whereas like and so like both Mercury and Mars were not doing well then, and they were also square Neptune. That for me also came up in the classic like Mercury Mars way, like destructive words and
Yeah, yeah.
arguments,
I think
et
it was
cetera,
for New
right?
Year's Eve. I think it was for New Year's Eve. We
Yeah, it
discussed
was
it on
like
our New
the
Year's Eve live.
28th
Yeah,
or 29th, and it was still
yeah,
an
something.
aspect
Yeah,
on
yeah,
New Year's. Yeah. Um, yeah, so then but this one is much more productive, right? So we
yeah.
have like Mercury direct, both
Hmm.
Mercury and Mars visible, with Mars exalted, and I think this is a really good time
Hmm.
for like strategizing, right? If Mercury is sort of the mind, communication, articulation, compartmentalizing things, picking apart details, then Mercury Mars together here is just going to be a really like productive day in which one could like set their mind to like a mental task, but maybe accomplish a lot along those lines. Especially maybe one related, right, to earthy things, right? So I don't know if you're just trying to like get your budget straight, or you're trying to maybe map out the architecture of your year, like sit down with your calendar and like put it
Yeah,
all up. What is this year going to look like? I think
yeah.
that's a good time to do that, you know?
If long-term plans, I'm thinking about long-term plans, not the short ones, but because
Yeah,
there's
sort of look at things with foresight for sure.
yeah, yeah. That's a good one. Yeah. So I know what can be a downside of this. Like, is there any downside of this Mars in Capricorn, or for people who are not ready to act? What would we suggest to them, for example?
Okay,
Up.
yeah. That's a good question. The only downside, I think, is that Mars will, like I said, square the nodes while
Mhm,
it's passing through Capricorn, and sort of activate the generally chaotic nature of the nodes,
mhm,
right? The way they sort of can bring fluctuations of fate, sort of unexpected events that cause you to quickly shift on
mhm,
your feet, right, and adjust as sort of your life exhales some things and inhales others. That being said, like if you're not ready to, I don't know, hop on the Mars and Capricorn bandwagon and act very boldly, I mean, I think even starting small, like Capricorn, yes, is like a very ambitious sign, but it also recognizes that the path to the mountaintop is sort of just
mhm,
like one step at a time. So even starting small and taking concrete concrete steps that are like incremental is like a pretty valuable
mm.
Capricornian thing. It doesn't have to be like going to the gym and, I don't know,
Yeah, yeah,
working
yeah,
out
yeah,
for
yeah.
2 hours straight. It can be, I'm going to wake up like 15 minutes early and just stretch. It doesn't have
Yes,
to be
I like that.
incredibly ambitious.
Yeah, I like that because Saturn is the ruler of this Mars, and Saturn takes
Hmm.
time. So it's for a long runs, and even just if you make plan, as you said, like a strategize, make a plan. If you don't do actions, if you make up your mind to do something, I think it can also be beneficial in the long
Yeah.
run. Just
One last thought on like Mars in Saturn signs, and I guess this still counts for Aquarius, is that
hmm
like Saturn being sort of the lord of impermanence, of limits, especially the
hmm
ultimate limit of our life, in that we will all die one day. I think Mars is lent a certain memento mori, right? Like this death awareness that like um, the best time to act is now, because nothing is guaranteed, right?
yeah.
Your life could be cut short at any moment. Sort of Mars can act in Capricorn and Aquarius with this keen awareness that like nothing lasts forever, and therefore it's like this way of evaluating
Mm,
actions, and it's like, well, is this a judicious use of my
yeah.
time, knowing that my time is limited, right? That is, I think, also like a value of Mars in Cap
Yeah.
or Aquarius.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
thinking after Mars in Sagittarius, who likes to have fun and likes to slack. When this Mars comes in, like no more. This was enough. I'll go back to
Well,
work, kind of a feeling,
Mars
right?
and Sag is very enthusiastic, but
Yeah,
it's a lot of talk. But Mars and
yeah,
Capricorn knows that actions speak louder than words, so sometimes it's
yeah,
best to just not talk and do instead, right?
yeah. That sounds good. Yeah, awesome. So you heard it here, guys. First, use this January energy. Before we go to Mars in Aquarius, anything else you
Sure.
want to mention for this
That's
Capricorn?
it for Mars and Cap. Besides being
Okay,
stoked about it.
okay. So Mars goes to Aquarius on February 13th.
Yeah, the 12th, 13th, and immediately conjoins Pluto in Aquarius,
hmm
right? Pluto moves
Yes.
into Aquarius on the 20th of this month, and
Yeah.
Mars will immediately conjoin it, when it enters,
Woohoo!
right? Yeah, I know.
That's gonna be
Very.
bombastic Valentine's, pre-Valentine's, guys. Just I'm letting you know, use it well.
Well, so like I know in modern, I'm not modern, right? But I know, isn't in modern like Pluto considered a higher octave of Mars,
Yes,
like sort of
yes, it
like
is. Yes, you're
it's like
completely right. So
the
this is like
Charizard to Mars's Charmander or something. It's like the
it,
evolved form.
it's bombastic, literally. So you have to know how to deal with that energy. It can be really too much to handle. Let's say.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah,
Well, I
in that
think what
sense,
they can both agree on is willpower, right? They both
absolutely.
touch upon power and the will to power, in the words of Friedrich Nietzsche, right? That
And control. I have
Yeah.
to mention control for Pluto. So it does have this, wanting to control. Like I want to do it
Mm.
my way, and I'm going to control. It's just it can be very that, and in Aquarius, very fixed sign. Not letting go. So that's can be a downside of this. But tell us something positive.
Well, I think if Mars is like forward movement, then Pluto is definitely pouring like nitrous oxide in the tank. It aggrandizes Mars's desire, aggrandizes Mars's ambition, and yes, perhaps that's why you have the fear of sort of Machiavellian um, power
Hmm.
plays, right? In
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Mars Pluto dynamics and going too far. It's hard for me to know yet just exactly the shape of this, since we'll have like Pluto very freshly ingressed into Aquarius, and there's been like a lot of ink spilled already about like what on the collective level that could look like, especially like I don't know, fears of dystopia and sort of technology gone wrong. That
Yeah.
being said, the fact that it's happening right at like the first degree, I think what Mars will do is sort of, Mars is also inceptional and
Hmm.
initiatory. It could be the kickoff, or that like, the image that springs to mind is somebody kicking down a door, but like Mars kicks down the door into Aquarius and like opens it for Pluto and says, "This is what it's all going to be about," right?
I like that. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Actually, you're right. Maybe it's just gonna give us a flavor of even Pluto in Aquarius because the action that we're gonna see. So maybe it's gonna be just some kind of news that we're gonna hear or something. I don't know. Maybe there's gonna be some kind of new things that is happening. But on a personal level, when I see Mars and Pluto together in somebody's chart or something, I had a client. She had this in her seventh house, and I know that instead of having fights and power struggles and having control, try to be like I always told her, try to be a power couple. So think about this energy. How can you synergy of this instead
sure,
of disruption? Like it can be because it can be very productive in that
sure.
sense, right? If
Yeah.
it's not in the
Well,
destroyable
so
action. So
here's one thing I've been thinking about like Pluto and Aquarius is that if Aquarius is sort of aligned with the star card in tarot, right, which is this image of a nude woman pouring out two glasses of water, and her nudeness sort of suggests
mhm.
innocence. There's this beautiful star glowing in the background, and there's this sense of renewed faith and optimism and all these things associated with the star card, right? Like it's a really
Yeah,
nice omen to
beautiful.
receive in a tarot spread, right? That card comes immediately after the Tower, which is Mars's card in the tarot,
Mm.
right? And the Tower is like this institution in which you invested so much energy and time and hope that came crashing down, when a
Mhm.
bolt struck it out of the blue, right? Um, so the star is sort of like you've sifted through the rubbles and the ruins and you've grieved your losses and now you're ready to start again. And I think
Mm.
Pluto sort of acts in that same way, where like at least in my own life, as I've backtracked through the two sort of Pluto transits that I've lived through, is that there's this like intense initiating event, this inceptional moment, right, where
Mhm.
something, the foundations of something is
Yeah,
shaken, right, and then the rest of the transit is sort of grappling with that.
yeah.
At least that was my experience of like Pluto and Sag and Pluto and Cap. So I'm expecting something
I
similar
know.
to happen, where it's like, and maybe Mars will be a part of this, where it's like Mars or Pluto in Aquarius is very like this, dramatic shift from Cap to Aquarius, and
Yeah.
then the fallout is the rest of the time, the subsequent 20 years of Pluto in Aquarius.
Yeah,
Um,
it's also like a new cycle, right? So every 2 years, I think Mars will meet Pluto or something, or
yes,
not,
yes,
right? So like it's a new 2 year cycle, right? It's coming up. So think about what do you want
and
to initiate? How do you want to act upon with this? How do you want to work with Pluto? In that sense,
yeah.
in the next 2 years. Yeah, awesome. What's after that?
Well, speaking of 2 year cycles, we may as well skip ahead to March when Mars enters Pisces. There are like some squares. Oh, wait, actually, I don't want to skip over that.
Okay,
One thing that I'm actually looking forward to that I think makes my top five list as far as like things that Mars is doing this year
okay.
that I'm really interested in is that Mars will conjoin Venus at 6 degrees of Aquarius. It's almost 7 degrees, right? So after it passes Pluto and it's out of aspect to Pluto, it conjoins Venus.
There's,
And
on the 22nd. I'm just telling people who want to
yes,
track this on the
yes, thank
22nd,
you.
right?
So
Yeah.
what I'm looking forward to about that is that if you recall when we
Mm-hmm.
had Venus in for an extended amount of time for Leo this summer, the start of that transit was Venus chasing Mars through Leo. They
Yeah, I
were in
remember.
Leo for most of that time together, and they came within 3 degrees of
Yeah.
conjunction, but it didn't happen, right? Venus slowed down. She got
Yeah.
dragged back into the underworld to attend to her business in Leo, whereas like Mars got to run forward into Virgo. So it's interesting that like we had this almost conjunction that was a key element of that Venus retrograde in Leo, and now on the opposite side of Aquarius, they finally, or the opposite side of the zodiac, which is Aquarius, they finally get to meet again. So I think what I'm looking to understand is how when this occurs, it will be connected to what for me was a very dramatic Venus and Leo summer, right?
Uh,
It
it
is,
is funny. Yeah, usually Mars chases Venus, and now this was different. And then she kind of changed her mind. She was like, "Yeah, I want you. Maybe I don't want you." And, she went back, and then we'll meet you. It was just a funny. Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
well,
it
and
was very dramatic.
if
Mm.
if if we wind this back again like 2 years in 2022, the last time they conjoined as well was when they were bouncing back and forth. They entered Aquarius together. They went after Venus ended
Mm.
her retrograde in Capricorn. They entered Aquarius together and were like doing this, like passing each other until Venus finally sped beyond Mars and left him behind. And I think their conjunction was like the 5th or 6th of March in 2022. Um, and that was like a huge moment of relief because she'd been like trapped between Saturn and Mars for a long time, and also retrograde with Pluto. So that spring I remember was like a big relief following those sort of Venusian troubles. But here, this conjunction is different, where it's more like the attainment of a desire or consummation or completion of this like
Mhm.
nearly 6 month long
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
process,
like a
right? That
reunion.
started with Venus and Leo.
It's like a long waiting reunion, kind of.
Yes.
Like they were longing for each other for so long. So, and this is going to be an intellectual sign. So, what are their desires and how they're going to get it is going to be, together, right? So they're going to feel the same thing. They will want the same thing. So that's going to be good.
Yeah,
I mean, with
totally.
Mars and Pluto first, and then Venus and Mars together, this Aquarian energy, we're gonna feel it. I think we're gonna feel, what will this Pluto transit be like? This is all connected. I feel it's a lot of Aquarius energy.
Right. Well, we're going to get all these planets conjoining Pluto throughout, I think, early February it is. And we'll get to see
Yeah,
what is Pluto Aquarius about from a variety of angles, right?
yeah, yeah. Amazing. That's gonna be fun. Fun. Lovers reunite.
Yes.
Sparkles. So maybe you change your Valentine's to from the 13th, 14th to the 22nd, guys. Just a thought.
Well, so here's the thing that I can give as like a concrete example. For me, a key element of this past summer was like trying to get a musical project off the ground. And then realizing that I didn't have the right equipment and blah 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 to be able to get it started. But sort of the ground was laid for that, and the desire to do that creative work was initiated. And it's only now that I'm starting to get all the equipment, get everything laid out. And the way I've mapped out my year, it's like, oh, when will I be able to start writing and recording music? In about the middle of February, which is when we're going to have the Venus Mars conjunction, right? So it's like, just look back and what were you hungering after and unable to sort of sink your teeth into? Like, I think now that comes back around in
I
Feb.
like that. I
Yeah.
like that. That's like, as I said, nice reunion, finally working together. That's so
Yes.
pretty. Oh, all the best with your music, and I want to hear everything first.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll give you a teaser. It will be astrologically related. So take that for what it's worth.
Excited! Look at me! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! No, no, no! I'm going to be impatient. I'm still a Gemini with Gemini Moon and Gemini Sun. I can't wait until February now for a teaser. Anyway, awesome. So that's great February for us. So you said March. Yeah. So Mars goes to Pisces on the 22nd of March. So we skip a month ahead.
Yeah. So if we look forward now to Mars in Pisces, The key element is that that happens at the end of March, March 22nd, so not long after the spring
Mhm.
equinox. At that point, Mars will be applying to a conjunction with Saturn, which then perfects on April 10th. So, like I said,
Mhm.
speaking of 2 year cycles, we get a Mars Saturn conjunction every
Mhm.
2 years. The last one was April 4th, 2022, and that one was in Aquarius. I think the degree was like 21 or 22 degrees of Aquarius, if I recall correctly. So it's interesting. This is
Mhm.
the first one we've had in 6 years that isn't in a Saturn ruled sign. So
Mhm.
it's in Pisces, right?
Yeah.
Instead. And what's dramatic about this is like, yes, Mars Saturn cycles are really about, um, they are a new moon moment for Malefica, right? For sort of subjectively
Okay.
um, negative experiences to some degree or challenges, right? Things that
Okay.
we must overcome. So this is,
14th.
yeah, this is the April 10th at
April
14
10th. Yeah.
at
14
14
degrees.
Pisces.
Hmm.
The friction that arises here is due to Mars and Saturn both being extreme, but in their own ways. So Mars is extremely hot, whereas Saturn is extremely cold. Mars is extremely fast, whereas Saturn is extremely slow. So when they are conjunct, the
Hmm.
tension arises from those inherent contrarieties. You could think like aggression versus depression, right?
I
And
can,
I
I
think,
can, I can. Sorry to interrupt you. I can justify that because I have that in my natal chart. I have
oh,
exact
gotcha.
conjunction with Saturn, Mars in Leo. So,
Oh, good.
like
I think we
10
talked
minutes
about that
apart.
during our first live.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's so I know that. Yeah, feeling
Yeah.
anyway.
So like this tension of it's a frustration
Mhm.
of willpower, right? Because I
Yeah.
think generally speaking, when these conjunctions roll around, Saturn you could see as having the upper hand. And it's Mars's willpower frustrated because it meets this immovable force in Saturn. Like Mars wants to go, 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 but Saturn just wants it slow, right? So I think we can see this as being the closing of one cycle, which the last one when it occurred was just at the start of the war in the Ukraine. And a lot of those moments in the Mars Saturn cycle were intimately tied into that conflict. And now we have all kinds of conflicts brewing around the world. So it'll be
Mm.
interesting to see what happens then,
And yeah, and
especially.
both. Sorry, both Mars and Saturn are not very. They're not very happy in Pisces anyway.
Yeah,
So that's.
they each get like a decan in Pisces, right? Saturn
Mhm.
has the first decan and Mars has the third decan in Pisces, so
Okay.
they have some strength, but
Mhm.
not a whole lot. I think Mars, if I recall correctly, has triplicity rulership by night, if I recall correctly. So
I don't
like
know by
Mars,
heart. I took a workshop on trapezoid rulers, but I don't know by heart. It's
I'm still trying to memorize them all, and it's hard for me to bring
it's
to
hard.
mind sometimes.
You have to
Um,
print. I have to print it actually and put it in my little book, so I have a reference every time I look at it.
no,
Anyway, go
that's
ahead.
helpful to have those things on your desk for sure
Yeah.
during consults. But yeah, so the most dramatic thing about this conjunction,
Hmm.
though, is the fact that 2 days prior, when the conjunction is applying and less than a degree and a half away, Mars will be the ruler of an Aries total solar eclipse, right? This really nasty eclipse that is
Yeah.
conjunct Chiron, right, at 19 degrees of Aries, I believe. And if we look at sort of like the transit of the North Node through Aries as sort
Yeah.
of this adrenalized return to conflict and war, which is played
Yeah.
out on a world stage, then this I think will be with Chiron in the mix, this sort of like
Mhm.
revisitation, contemplation of like what is the value of conflict when it leaves so many folks traumatized, right? I see like a conversation perhaps cropping up, or even like peace movements cropping up
Mm.
of people saying like, no, we don't want this, right? And that's why I want to say that like Mars is not just the warrior, but also activists and those who fight
Yeah.
for just
Yeah.
causes.
Yeah.
And if we think of Mars and Pisces, Mars is subsumed to Jupiter's desires, And in Pisces, what the desire is for unification,
Mm-hmm.
for things to be brought
Mm,
into an all-encompassing whole, much the same way that like water can take anything into itself. The ocean can soak up
mm.
anything, right? The ocean is this massive place that can swallow up anything, right? So here I think we could, like on a personal level, tap into sort of Mars as the spiritual warrior, right? Where the
Mm.
aggression of Mars is redirected towards sort of Neptunian compassion, the extension of mercy and grace, the fierce devotion to fighting one's own demons and also fighting sort of the demonic energies of greed, hatred, anger, and ignorance, right? Um, yeah.
I'm thinking with Saturn there together with Mars in Pisces. I think about refugees, like a sea of refugees, because all of these wars. I just feel like it's gonna be, like they're gonna start. We're gonna see more and more. Okay, they're gonna move. They're gonna physically will be showing up. The consequences of all this fighting.
That's a good point actually, because I think when Mars had its retrograde station last summer, there was actually a headline in the news about a refugee ship, unfortunately sinking, I believe, somewhere in the
Yeah, yeah,
Mediterranean. But yeah, the fluid movements of
yeah.
peoples. There's sort of like a refugee imagery in that Saturn ruled decan as well. So yeah, that's actually a good point.
And then you
Um,
said missionary work. I'm thinking about, people going and wanting to save the others, like missionaries going to the war zones or around,
hmm.
and
Yeah, like humanitarian
yeah,
aid
yeah,
for sure,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
So
a
that
good
could be
point.
also a topic. Yeah, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be a closure of the war. Unfortunately,
No.
I don't feel it. I don't feel the
No, I
whole
mean,
this year with the snows, right? The whole year with the snows. I don't see it, to be honest.
probably not, no. I think that's one thing that, like, just on a personal level was frustrating coming out of COVID, where it was like, "Oh, wow, we can muster global resources,
Yeah,
countries can cooperate to sort of like address a large crisis on a large scale. But why can't we do that for anything? Why can't we do that for like climate change? Why can't we do that for
yeah.
global conflicts or lack of water or food scarcity? And the list goes on and on and on. Like the world is what we make it. It's this group of tacit agreements that we can easily unagree to and make up new ones, right? I digress.
No, no, I know it's fine. It's all connected, because this is the year we're talking about. We're talking about the energies, and Mars is the energy of action. And I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't know where I read this. Was it Threads or Instagram? Maybe even you posted, reposted. I see so many things that somebody mentioned, instead of using AI just to discriminate writers, why can't we just make robots who would clean up all this mess, like the environment? Like use
sure,
AI for
sure.
good things. So that can maybe we can see. Anyway, I'm just thinking about it. Maybe somebody can come in, not human, and clean it up after humans. We'll see. Okay, digression over. What is next? What is happening?
So
Mark?
towards the tail end of Mars's transit through
Hmm.
Pisces, you do get a conjunction with Neptune at 28 degrees, almost 29 degrees. So like right at the tail end of
Yeah,
Pisces,
yeah.
you get Mars conjunct Neptune. My Mars conjunct Neptune delineation is kind of my whole rant that I just went on about sort of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche's notion of the spiritual warrior. I think I'm a big fan of Mars with Neptune, which I don't think
Okay.
most people are. But yeah, sort of see Mars as, at least on a personal level, like one's ambitions can be set aside, sort of
Hmm.
one's egoic drives can be set aside and then subsumed or redirected towards greater causes or greater collective efforts,
Hmm.
right? But on a mundane level, I wanted to backtrack to trace it down, but if I recall correctly, the last time Mars was conjunct Neptune, it was when there was a Russian ship that was sank during the early days of the Ukraine conflict, and it was, I believe, the missiles used were described. They're like called Neptune missiles or
Yes,
something
yeah,
like
I
that.
remember that. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, it was
it was
called
a really
Neptune. Yes,
alarming sync. So it was just like, oh, it was a martial event, a battle, the sinking of a
yeah,
ship, like in a water sign, right, Pisces. And what was the weapon used? It was called Neptune.
yeah, I remember
So
that.
that, yeah, it was rather alarming. Um, but yeah, so that will be an interesting day as well. That's April 28th, and then on the 30th of April, right at the end, Mars enters Aries. It's sort of
Yeah,
most
that's right.
brash most brash domicile for sure,
Now,
where
now,
it expresses itself through action, much like Capricorn, but
yeah.
it's a very demonstrative, glory seeking action, right? Aries is where the sun is
Mhm.
exalted, and there's a sense that, like, I will show you who and what I am through my actions, right? There's this sense that one's own ability to shine, to be set apart,
Mhm.
comes through these very brilliant and daring, reckless, risky, brawny, macho heroics, right? That's Mars and Aries.
I'm thinking now I'm looking at all this. I didn't look at Mars transits until I'm talking to you. I'm going through the honeycomb book. Hi guys,
Oh
I know
yeah.
that they're not a sponsor. I'm not but I just love them. I want to recommend everybody. It's so good. On a personal level, first of all, my seventh house starts at 28 degrees Pisces. So I have
Oh,
Neptune,
interesting.
Mars conjunction. That's on my DC, and then I have 3 days later Mars sextile Pluto on my south node, 2 degrees of Aries.
Oh goodness. You'll have a very busy end of April, it sounds like.
That's
I don't
beginning,
know.
yeah.
Having Mars Neptune conjunct on the degree of, if that, I don't know if that's like your DC, or at least your seventh house cusp. That sounds
Yeah,
like, I don't know. Go take a sauna with, like, go to a sauna with your partner. That's what springs to mind.
yes. I'm gonna have a guy to my
That'd be my
babysitter, and we're gonna
delineation.
go. Yes, yes, I like that. Yeah. Anyway,
Nice.
it was just interesting how I have this Mars is triggering. It's very active in my chart. Awesome. Yeah.
Totally.
So he's gonna sextile Pluto just a couple of days after he enters. Um,
Yes.
and then the notes are going to be affected the whole May.
Yeah, that's the main thing to note. There isn't
Hmm.
really a whole lot that Mars does in Aries
Yeah.
besides being co-present with the North Node, and then eventually conjunct the North Node at 14 degrees, nearly 15 degrees of Aries, right? And this is, I've been thinking about this combination a lot, in that, like, what do, the same way we were thinking about, like, what do Mars and Pluto agree about? Well, what do Mars and the North Node agree about? If the North Node is the head of a dragon, or the head of a
Mm.
ravenous beast, or if you think of the Rahu in sort of Vedic
Hmm.
mythology, in which it
Yeah.
is a decapitated demon, right, which continues to eat and eat and eat and never be satisfied. What they agree upon is hunger, right, or sort of
Hmm.
losing one's head in the thrill of the moment. The phrase that springs to mind is seeing red. Like, people talk about, like, going into a fit of rage and seeing
Mm.
red, right? Like, something else takes over, you lose sort of volitional control, you become possessed by the spirit of rage. Um, so I think there's going to be a real danger throughout
Mm.
Mars's
Yeah.
co-presence with the North Node for hot-headedness. And considering sort of the mess that is happening in April, and a lot of the messes happening in May, just like looking at the larger picture, yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's going to be a difficulty keeping cool. If you just think about, like, Mars, especially as, like, adrenaline or fight or flight,
Mm.
or having one's nervous system activated, having it
Hmm.
nearby the North Node is just going to be, I think, a possibly taxing time, considering Aries, while incredibly potent, lacks staying power, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of like Aries just kind of like, I'll give you an example. I had a friend who
Okay.
was an MMA fighter, and he had Mars and Aries, as well as, I believe, some other planets. It's been a while since I've looked at his chart, but the most important
Okay.
thing is Mars and Aries, right? And
Okay.
he was really fun to watch. in that he was really good at going in super strong, and getting his opponent to tap out in less than a minute. Like he was so good at like round one knockouts and tap outs, right? But if he didn't get that his opponent in round one, he'd lose every time, right? He had no endurance, no staying power. His ability
for long
was
term. Yeah,
exactly, he
for
could
yeah.
overwhelm his opponent straight out of the gate, right? So what we're gonna look at with that, like, what's the time period? It's
Mhm. So who
April
makes the
30th
first punch
to
wins? That's what you're trying
right.
to say.
You strike
That's the
first.
energy.
Yeah, but like needing to strike first for
Hmm.
over 5 weeks, like that's going to be exhausting. And then we get Mars into Taurus on June 8th, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So the peak, I just want to say the peak of Mars North Node conjunction is the May 19th.
yeah,
And I'm thinking at least on that day is going to be the most potent energy. Try not to be the actor of the movie, just make popcorn and watch it from somewhere else. That's all. Let's go
not
to
a bad
June.
idea. I
Yeah.
think if we also just think about the way like the North Node, if it is this hungry maw, which tends to,
Mm,
I think of it as like a light when it enters a house
mm,
in the birth chart, the same way like a light
yeah.
draws moths to a flame, they say, right? Like if you look at a light at night and
Mm,
you see all the like insects flocking around it, it's sort of the North Node in a house tends to draw energy to it and consume energy, so it often takes on like a big focus in our lives. um so when its ruler Mars enters, I think we'll have greater clarity around like what is the work that the North Node is doing in that house, and maybe have more gusto to go after that work. Um, but yeah, once Mars leaves, it might leave us all a little bit drained and in need of some Taurus, some Tauran snacks and goodies as we rest and
yes.
recuperate. You know,
And just like, I don't care, give me the chips, I don't care energy. so,
definitely.
so yeah, so first half of the year is more proactive, more assertive, let's say in a positive sense. Like
Yeah, in general, we just have a very lit up, active,
yeah,
and
yeah,
busy body Mars for like the
yeah,
first 6 months of the
yeah,
year. And
yeah.
that doesn't really slow down until Mars reaches like late Gemini in like August.
Okay, let's
Cause
see.
like
Okay, let's see for
it's
first Mars
doing
in
so
Taurus.
much this year. It's incredible.
I know,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, because
we
he's
can talk
fast.
Taurus though.
He's fast this year. Like he's going full speed ahead, as you said, right?
Well, and that's what's unique about Mars's
Yeah.
synodic cycle is that you
Mm,
get Mars when it goes retrograde, it like spends this crazy extended amount of time in a sign, but when it's direct, it moves through a sign in like 5 weeks and it hits
yeah.
all these conjunctions, squares, and so forth and so
Yeah,
on,
it's
right?
very a lot of action, just like Mars like. Mars
Yeah.
like lots of action, It is what it is. Okay, so June, you said so it's going to Taurus on June 9th, and then
Yeah, June 8th or 9th.
squaring Pluto right away, right?
Yeah,
So
straight out of the gates, we'll have a reawakening of Pluto's work in Aquarius. It'll be at 1 degree of Aquarius by then, and then doesn't do a whole lot else until it reaches a
yeah.
conjunction with Uranus at 26 degrees of Taurus on July
Hmm.
15th. And
Hmm.
I think continuing this sense of like what do planets agree on, what Mars and Uranus agree on is revolution, right? Flipping the table. There's a Beastie Boys album called I Don't. It's either a song or album, but it's called I Don't Play Any Game That I Can't Win. I don't play no game that I can't win, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
think
Yeah.
yeah, like Uranus and Mars agree, like, if I can't win this game, it's not worth playing. I'm going to flip the board
Mm,
and start something else instead. And although Uranus is sort of like revolutionary work, I think has been in Taurus less martial, I guess, in tone, right, than
yeah,
you
yeah,
usually get for Uranus. It's been productive nonetheless. Like I have a friend who's a labor reporter and recently told me that 2023 was one of the best years on record for labor movements, and
yeah. See?
that like it was a really valuable time for striking workers to gain extra benefits and better
Mm-hmm.
pay, right? So that seems like a key Uranus and Taurus theme. Mars coming to Uranus and backing Uranus up, right? Like joining
Mm-hmm.
Uranus together there. The danger though is that they'll also be conjunct Algol, which is sort of this fearsome
Mm.
star that is currently at the tail end of Taurus.
End of Taurus. Yeah,
And
yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of ink spilled about like the fearsome quality of Algol and it as sort of this much like Pluto, this sort of like this like amoral will that is relentless, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
sort of the quality of Mother Nature, not as our mother, but something we also contend with,
So,
right? Something that is fearsome, that defies being cute and cuddly, right? At
do
times,
you
and
feel that we
instead
can
being
feel that? Do you feel that we can sense some or see experience some natural disasters at that time?
yes. I think
Mm.
like there have been a couple key moments throughout the past several years where it was like most recently with the Iceland,
Yeah, yeah,
the
volcano.
volcano in
Yeah,
Iceland, where they said, "Oh, we think it might erupt soon because there have been these tremors." Right? I can't recall, but I believe the moon was conjunct Uranus at the time.
yeah, it was something. Yeah,
There,
yeah.
were- there was a Uranus activation when that story was published, and I think Mars conjunct Uranus, yes, could be like literal Earth shaking, right? If you think of Taurus as a very stable Earth sign and Uranus and Mars as destabilizing, what destabilizes the Earth, but like earthquakes, earth shakes, right? Um,
I hope nothing happens. I'm planning to visit Croatia next summer. I'm going to spend there 2 months, and that's a very shaky thing. They had a lot of awful earthquakes there in the last couple of years. Anyway,
for your
hopefully,
sake, I hope it's a relatively peaceful time, but we'll see if the astrology allows that,
yeah,
you know?
we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, yeah. So just I'm thinking about Mars and Taurus in general. Gardening. It's going to be June, July. Spread it outside. Do your gardens. Do your,
Yeah.
it's a
That's
beautiful
the
way.
that's the most valuable use of
Yeah.
Mars and Taurus is like there's that Orphic hymn to Mars where at the end the last line that says give to Ceres the weapons of the field, meaning like
Mm-hmm.
beat these swords into plowshares and instead use sort of like Mars's gusto in an agricultural sense.
Mm-hmm.
Leaning into things like landscaping. That is, I think,
Right.
Mars and Taurus at its best
And it's
expression,
it's
right?
gonna sextile Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, so it's gonna bring,
Correct.
so there's gonna be some nice flowing energy, very, receptive and tuned energy with this Mars. I like that. That's gonna be like a nice beginning of summer. Not bad. I mean, only this little thing with Uranus, but we can disregard that. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be a road bump for sure.
Yeah.
So then the 20th of July,
Hmm.
Mars enters Gemini. It immediately trines Pluto on
Yeah.
the 21st, which I believe is retrograde at that point,
Yes,
and
it
it's at
is.
0 degrees
0 degrees.
of
Yeah.
Aquarius.
Hmm.
And then, so that's, same activation of Pluto in Aquarius, but rather than coming through in a harsh way, it's,
Mm.
Mars cooperating with Pluto on the work that it seeks to do. And at that point, Jupiter will also be in Gemini. So Mars will race
Mm.
forward and conjoin Jupiter in Gemini at 16 degrees of Gemini, which is Mars's decan. Um, Mars
Mm.
and Jupiter both have decans in Gemini.
Yeah.
It's the first two, Jupiter and then Mars. And there's some interesting tension between the two in Gemini that I think can be felt in this like endless proliferation that Gemini is good at. Like Gemini is this sense of like things splitting, right? Like it's the sign of the twins.
Yeah.
It likes multiples.
Absolutely.
It likes twos, fours, eights, the way things get doubled. And the reason I think Jupiter struggles in Gemini and the lesson lying in that first decan is that yeah, Jupiter loves to grow things,
Yeah.
to,
Yeah. To see the big picture, kind of like a.
yeah, Jupiter loves abundance too,
Yeah.
but like to really like if you think about like endless dreams or
Mhm.
endless ideas. Like if they are just ideas and they don't go anywhere, they lack a sort of concrete
Yes, yes.
value.
Yeah,
And I see the subsequent Mars rule decan being about like a sharp mind, which can cut through the many different potentials, dreams, ideas, whatever is being generated by the mind there, and pick one, right? Cut away the dead fruit and say, I'm just going to focus on this
yeah.
single path. And that's kind of what the Lovers card, which is representative
Mm,
of Gemini, is about too. Like, I'm going to commit to this person. I'm going to commit to this path. I'm going to commit to this new opportunity, which is before me. So Mars in conjunct Jupiter and Gemini is being a time where it's about like,
mhm.
okay, Jupiter entered the Gemini house of your chart, and Jupiter has offered you a lot of cool ideas
Mhm.
about like things it could do in Gemini. But Mars will enter with sort of a judicious sword, a judicious approach, and say, like, no, that won't take root. That won't take root. You need to just pick one bud and invest all your energy here. So using Mars to sort of get shrewd, to think rationally, right? Someone who thinks rationally, we often says has like a sharp mind.
Yeah,
So kind
yeah.
of cut fact from fiction, and then
Yeah, just
commit to a
facts.
thing.
Give it the facts.
Yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
thinking Mars and Gemini is also very like the words are the weapons, So
Yeah, and we saw that when we had Mars's extended retrograde in Gemini,
yeah,
at the end of 2022 and bleeding into
yeah,
2023.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to say with Jupiter and Mars in Gemini, and it's going to be summer, and people, I just watch out for false news. Although they're kind of together,
Well, yeah, and
it can be a
Mars will
lot.
be squaring Saturn at the same time. So like Jupiter and Saturn will be squaring each other at that time, and Mars comes in, but on the side of Jupiter. And that's the opening square then also in the Mars Saturn cycle, which
Yeah,
started a couple months prior, right?
yeah,
So there's a conflict there that immediately arrived, like whatever new conflict was sown by Mars and Saturn during their conjunction. Now we see it
yeah,
sort of the flames are fanned at this time, and also Jupiter and Saturn dueling between growth and contraction is also highlighted at this time.
yeah,
So it'll be interesting to see, yeah, because there's two big cycles that are lining up right then in that exact moment
yeah. So we'll see
on
how that. Yeah, it can be.
August 14th and 15th.
Yeah. So we're in August already, right?
Yes. So let's leap ahead to then September.
Yep.
There's some squares that Mars does well in Gemini,
Yeah, with
but
Saturn.
um,
Think about. Yeah.
by by September 4th, Mars enters Cancer. It's still moving pretty quickly at that point,
Mm-hmm.
but we should know that by the time Mars reaches Cancer, we're going to have an extended stay of Mars in Cancer. There will be also a period of Mars in Leo, but because of Mars's retrograde, we're basically going to have Mars in Cancer from September 4th, 2024, right until April 16th, 17th, 2025.
Oh my
So
God.
it's like 7 months of Mars in Cancer, except for a short period throughout December and early January.
Yeah.
So like there's
Yeah.
uh, about a month and a half long period of Mars and Leo.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be fun.
I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking. It's my 10th or 11th house, depending on the system, and it's just
Mhm.
again work, work, work. Anyway, it's okay. We have to work. So what do you think about this? So now this is a long like a Mars in Cancer is not it's not the best position. Uh, what do you tell me? Tell me because I'm kind of
Okay, so if we want to seek a valuable use of Mars and Cancer, we need to look at the moon, and we need to question what did the moon and Mars agree upon? And we can find that in like, well, what the moon wants to ensure the growth and continuance of young tender things, and it has a lot to do with food, right? And Mars in Cancer, I see as being the recognition that in order for you to live, other things must die. In order for you to keep
mm,
living, you need to eat like 3 square meals a day, and in order to do that, that means you needed to, or a farmer needed to kill a cow, kill a pig, take eggs from a chicken. A fish needed to be caught. You know,
Yeah, yeah, physical thing.
green vegetables needed to be
Hunting.
ripped from the earth where they were growing, right? Hunting.
Yeah.
You know, Mars in Cancer is sort of like the violence inherent in a world where things seek to
I'm
persist and
thinking
live.
also.
And
So this image came to mind. I'm milking a cow, literally,
yeah, yeah,
milking the.
totally.
It's just
The
anyway.
moon has a lot to do with dairy products
That
for sure
that's why I
in
thought,
Taurus
yeah, milking
and
a cow. It's
Cancer.
right there on spot.
Yeah.
Mars in Cancer. Okay.
So I think the reason Mars struggles in Cancer is because it's like if Cancer is like a baby nursery, well, you wouldn't bring a knife into a baby nursery, you know, like you don't really need fire in a greenhouse where like tender plants are growing, right? It's just Mars in Cancer is like inappropriate, but the way it can be used is and as sense there and as a result there's a sense of like depressed, suppressed or
Mhm.
repressed martial energy. If you think of like the moon's connection to kinship, to
So,
family, connection, you can think of like fighting with family as well. You know.
okay, that all makes sense. But now, on a global level, I'm thinking, will this ease then the fighting? Because are we going to show more care?
Mm. So I was debating this with a friend the other day because I was like, if you look back when we had Mars retrograde in Aries, it was an incredibly destructive
Hmm.
time period. There were massive wildfires up and down the West Coast. This was in 2020, right? But we had Mars retrograde in a fire sign and in its domicile. So it's like, will Mars, where it has fallen in Cancer, yield a more tame Cancer, like Cancerian retrograde, right? Will we have a less aggressive face of Mars? I think that's possible, but at the end of the day, Mars is still going to yield some sort of destruction. And there were still ongoing wars and conflicts
So
during
yeah,
past
because
Mars
because
retrogrades in Cancer.
yeah, so Mars needs to use the energy, otherwise the energy uses us. We have to use it, otherwise it uses us in
It
some
must
sense,
it must be expressed in some way, shape, or form.
right?
And the the time Mars is actually most visible is when it is retrograde. Now, that being said, like I know we're talking about Mars and Cancer. It does station retrograde in Leo at 6 degrees of Leo, but
Okay,
then it walks back
go go
into
go. Yeah,
um,
please.
yeah, it walks back into Cancer by the I have the date up by the six. Nope, hold on.
I don't have that information, to be
I
honest.
did all the math on this
It's okay.
before. Oh, January 6th, a year from today, Mars returns to Cancer
Okay.
after being in Leo. So um, you get this island of Leo in the middle of all
Hmm.
this Cancer. And whereas like Cancer is very much focused on extending care and
Hmm.
compassion to others, Leo is very much about the aggrandizement of the self, the comfortability of standing out, of
Hmm.
shining, of letting your light shine and be received and recognized by the world, right? And Mars in Leo is a very gladiatorial Mars, right?
I know.
Leo has a
I know.
lot to do with like entertainment and like this is sport, right? This is Mars, but like subsumed
Yeah.
under sort of
Not if
play,
you have a
you
Saturn on
know.
the other side, then it's a little bit less, but it's okay.
Touche, touche. But that being said, like I think what we'll be playing with during this time of Mars, like on a personal level
Yeah, yeah.
rather than collective, uh, this retrograde where Mars bounces back and forth between Cancer and Leo is like, to what degree must I fight for myself, and to what
Mm.
degree must I fight for others, right? Am I excessively what's the word, like
It is. It.
the image that springs to mind is like, am I spending too much energy, like seeking to glorify my own actions when that energy or action could be like directed towards the care and nurturance of the
Yeah.
community of which I am a part, right? I think Mars in Cancer can be, fighting for it could be like a chivalrous knight holding up a shield to defend the
It's very
downtrodden. So it
patriotic.
could be like,
It's very patriotic. So I'm
yeah,
thinking, all this fighting is about, my land and fighting for the land. So there's a
yeah, that's another good point as
so
well. So it'll be
yeah.
interesting what sort of conflicts rear up at that time. This retrograde's going to do interesting things with the United States Sibley chart, and also is timed to various aspects of the U.S. election cycle
Oh
as
yeah.
well. So I'm not really looking forward to that, but just know that Mars enters its shadow period on October 4th when it reaches
Mm-hmm.
17 degrees of Cancer, and then it's not going to, and then it has its time in Leo, and then it's not going to leave Cancer until April 17th, 2025, when it returns to Leo. And then it doesn't leave the shadow of its retrograde and pass 6 degrees
Mm-hmm.
of Leo until May 5th, 2025. So it's this very extended time period. But that's just what Mars does when it's retrograde. It really grinds down on a small slice of the zodiac for a long
We
time.
survived the Gemini retrograde, so we will do this as well.
Honestly, the Mars and Gemini retrograde didn't hit me all that hard. I'm very thankful for it, but it wasn't configured to anything nasty in my chart, so it was actually pretty gentle to me, I will say.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I was
And I wish the same for everybody else. And there's one thing I need to note though about the Mars retrograde as well, though, is that it will create recurring oppositions
mhm.
to Pluto throughout that time. So
Yes.
like November 3rd, we get our first Mars
Mm.
Pluto opposition. At the time, Pluto will have walked back into Capricorn. So that's 29 degrees of Cancer and 29 degrees
See,
of
I don't like that
Capricorn.
either.
Yeah, I don't either, but it's coming for us.
Like in the 29
But I think
degrees.
that is going to be a very loud and dramatic conclusion to the Pluto in Capricorn era, right? Which we've undergone since
That's what I'm
2008.
saying. It's going to be like a
Um,
big bang ending of the Capricorn and
yeah,
Pluto. And Mars in Cancer, as I said,
v-
fighting for your country, for your home, for your loved ones, for
for your
your
family,
ancestry, where you
for your
belong.
chosen family.
Yeah. So this one
Yeah,
on a personal level
for
and on a global, this is going to be huge.
yeah.
This one is going to be even huger than the conjunction in spring. Yeah.
Definitely. One hopeful thing though about the early point part of that Mars retrograde is that on December 15th of this year, Mercury will conclude
Mhm.
retrograde itself. It will end a retrograde in Sagittarius, and when it does, it will be exactly trine to Mars
That's good.
retrograde in Leo. So that Mercury
Mhm.
cycle will be, I think, will offer key information to surviving
Mhm.
the Mars in Leo cycle
Maybe,
as
yeah,
well.
maybe the
Since Mars will have recently stationed retrograde, but Mercury's turning direct and looks at Mars and is like, here's some helpful tips, I think.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you, but I can't wait for Mars in Libra. After all of this, we need some peaceful at Mars. Trust me. Now that I'm looking at Mars this year, I can't wait for next year to have Mars in Libra at some point. Um, just because I think we need it. It's gonna be feisty Mars year.
Yeah, it will be a very feisty martial year, and it sort of ends on a cliffhanger of sorts. In that 2025 still carries much more of that Mars retrograde, and we don't really wrap up that retrograde until like we reach, like I said, until we reach the
And
springtime.
then 2025
Um,
is another story with Mars going direct and then Neptune going to Aries and
mhm.
Saturn and everything. And anyway, that's going to be a whole new chapter coming. Somebody mentioned somewhere, I read it somewhere, so that the 2024 is going to be like a bridge year between the old world 2023 and the new world coming in 2025. It's like a bridge year. Somebody mentioned that.
That sounds like something Austin Coppock would say. I know he also used the metaphor of a bridge to describe 2020 as well, because it was like the year that led us
Yeah.
into the 200-year long what do you call it, period of
Yeah,
Earth,
yeah, yeah.
right?
It might be him. I was watching his forecast with Chris Brennan. Maybe that's why.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. But there are a lot of changes coming
Mhm.
in 2025, so we can see it like 2024. We're sort of wrapping up a lot of key things like Uranus and Taurus and Neptune and Pisces. So Mars is coming in,
Mhm.
and we're wrapping up Pluto and Capricorn, and Mars is coming in to highlight all of those outer planets and sort of in a very excitatory, um, bombastic way, bring to conclusion what those transits were all about on a personal and collective level.
Oh yeah. So Azur also agrees that it mustn't be Austin. Yes, probably. I pick up so many. I listen to so
Yeah,
many different people. My Gemini brain, I can pinpoint where I heard it, but I know it wasn't. It was probably him. Yeah. So now that
yeah.
we kind of wrapped this story up. I'm now looking forward to Mars in Taurus for some reason because I think it's gonna be the best peaceful month and a half we're gonna have the beginning of summer. That's how.
Yeah, aside from that Uranus conjunction, but I think like Mars in Taurus, although like yes, it's opposite its domicile of Scorpio, Mars in Taurus can be quite. Oh yeah, that's right,
Yeah,
Azure. The halftime show metaphor. Yes.
I like that.
Um yes. The Mars in Taurus, if you've ever like spent time around cattle or spent time on a farm, like cattle, bulls, they're not always gentle creatures, right? Largely and for the
Mhm.
most part, they are. They're very nice to hang out with. They're very cuddly and cozy, but they're incredibly heavy and incredibly
And don't
strong.
poke them.
You do not
Don't poke
yeah, and
them.
you don't wanna get in their way, right? And it takes a long time to get, like, a cow going, right? If they're just laying down in the sun, but once they pick up speed, they are like
Oh
a
yeah.
wall of
Oh yeah.
force. So, Mars and Taurus, the difficulty is getting mad in the first place, like, getting going or
Red
recognizing that
flag.
one has
Red
been
red
slighted.
flag.
Yeah, yeah. It's difficult, I think, for Mars and
Mhm.
Taurus to like recognize that they have a right to their anger and that they can do something about it. But once they get going, it's difficult to stop them, right? Because it's
Yeah.
this like freight train energy rumbling along the tracks.
Yeah.
You can't just like throw the brakes on a train and it stops on a dime. You can't throw the brakes on like a charging bull and expect it to
No, no,
stop
that's it.
on a
Once it
dime either,
starts, yes,
right?
you're
So
right. The once it starts going, there's no stopping, no turning back. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you, Caleb. This was amazing, amazing. This overview of the Mars in this year. Do you have any final thoughts before we finish this up? I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, Mars is going to be doing different things
Mhm.
this year depending upon your chart. I think just look out for the all the conjunction moments with Venus, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Jupiter, etc. Like and so on. Look to all the conjunction moments as being like
Mhm.
exclamation points that will highlight like what that transit is about, but perhaps in its most raw and acute form, right? And like remember that Mars is not just the difficult brutish experience itself, but also the heroic
Yeah.
response to it. And that one can embody Mars as a peacekeeper, Mars can embody Mars as a protector, one can embody Mars as the dignified and efficient use of force to protect others
Mhm.
and to uphold one's principles of like a
Yeah.
just world, right? Mars isn't always an enemy.
Absolutely not.
And thank you, Azure, for being here and a part of this
Yeah.
conversation.
Thank you.
I know it's probably admittedly getting late in France, where I know you are now. So thank you for taking time out of your day to hang out with us.
Oh yeah, I just want to tell everybody that this is a great opportunity because we have a Martian year, a very active Mars this year, to use this opportunity and have a reading with Caleb, special Mars reading. I highly recommend. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share to our channels, follow us on Instagram and everywhere else, and reach out if you need anything to both of us. But use this opportunity. Caleb is really. A Mars guy, Mars 2 guy.
Yes, I'd love to pick apart Mars in your chart and help you find the best expression, the highest expression you can of Mars in all its glory in your own natal chart.
Yeah, and I always say use the energies wisely. That's kind of my this is how all of my aspects. Yeah, because
Love that.
because you have to be that's what I want to always just want to finish up with that. See you tomorrow with Andrew and Andre, and I'm going to talk
Andre?
about Saturn tomorrow. Yes, we have the malefic weekend.
Awesome.
We call it the malefic weekend.
Well, the moon is in Scorpio, so what a fitting way.
I started
to
with
join.
Jupiter just to get everybody going, and then now anyway, so I'm looking forward to tomorrow and Saturn, and then I'm going to have Sid with Uranus and Hannah with Neptune next week.
Nice.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Azul, for being with us, and for everybody who's watching later. Have a great New Year, Happy New Year, and see you soon. Bye, everybody.
See you soon.